Good evening and hello, everyone. Before you ask me why I'm speaking to you, let me tell you who I am. First, I am not a social media expert, but I usually pop up when there's an important struggle for justice that I want to talk about. What else? My name is Peyi Soyinka-Airewele. I'm a professor of politics at Ithaca College. I'm a member of the Tompkins County Human Rights Commission, and I'm the director of Verity Ministry, which is a network that supports women and other individuals in vulnerable situations. I'm going to try and keep to some notes I've written down, because otherwise I will get so troubled by what I want to say that I will go on for 2 hours. And you don't want to hear me speaking for 2 hours. I work with children who are victims of terrorism overseas, as well as those who suffer from horrendous experiences of abuse, domestic terrorism, social injustice, and even workplace harassment and oppression here in the States, particularly when it involves the lives of children, including those in the school system. I teach, I'm a professor, yes, and I love it, but I'll be the first to tell you that the educational system can be a festering pit of intimidation, abuse of power, victimization of the powerless, and a rampant misuse of funds. We won't talk about how corporate interests are corrupting our school systems. Someday I will talk about the colleges, including mine, but today I want to talk about the Ithaca City School District. Now, I've lived and worked in the Ithaca community of New York for over 2 decades, and I've raised 3 wonderful children through the school system. They have had many times some amazing teachers, but we have also fought against racism and abuse. And that struggle in this community is what brought the present superintendent of the school system to Ithaca. Fighting alongside Anjie Brown has meant that I have had to set aside the long-standing friendships I have with several members of the school board because I am demanding that they act with integrity in this situation. Over the past year, many people have asked me why I have not been intimidated by the pushback by the school district, its rather vicious and shameful approach in the case of what I will call Brown versus Brown and the Board of Education in Ithaca. For those who don't know, this is the case regarding Anjie Brown's quest for justice and for accountability and for the protection of her children in the school system. It has been a struggle against gaslighting, against lies, misinformation, impunity, and a blatant lack of ethics that has affected the welfare of her children. This has to do with the abuse of public office by those who were giving a sacred trust by the community. So it is a public struggle. And yet it is one that has happened only because the school district is headed by her former spouse, Dr. Brown. My position is that we cannot allow public officials to weaponize their seat of office as a tool of oppression in pursuit of a personal animosity. We cannot look the other way while powerful individuals earning close to $500,000 wage a war of harassment, marginalization, and victimization against a person who lacks the resources, the network, and social influence that they are privileged to enjoy. Let me say this. I have watched in dismay and with pity as some school district officials, a principal, and even school board members who should know better have surrendered to the dictates of friendship or perhaps of coercive power. So why have I been in the struggle? Let me say this very briefly. First, I'm a Christian. And as a Christian, I'm bound by all I believe to stand for truth and to speak out for what is just and right. I have looked into the reams of evidence. Let me show you what it looks like to be working with the bundles of evidence. And there is overwhelming proof of a terrible cascade of lies, of misinformation, of perjury, of unethical behavior, of the corruption of due process, in my opinion, on the part of some officials. And this has obstructed the course of justice, inflicted harm on innocent individuals. It has jeopardized the future of children in this district. Now, the second reason, I am a direct eyewitness to a lot of what has happened. And I stand here, well, I'm actually sitting, but I'm standing here waiting for any member of this school district or the Board of Education to contradict the truths that were contained in my affidavit and that has been supported by video, by witnesses, and by other evidence. Please listen. I did not want to say some of what I will say publicly, but Ms. Brown has urged me to go ahead because she's been forced to provide evidence, some of the things I will say to the school board and to the Department of Education. Along with some other members in the community, I personally saw and I heard the distressed child named in Ms. Brown's petition, pleading with anguish not to go with his father in February of 2020, last year, after he attended a church service. I saw the child, many of us did, run repeatedly back to his mother, only that he had to be compelled to leave for an overnight visitation with his father. The following day, I was at Cayuga Medical Hospital. Peyi, Soyinka-Airewele. I was at the Cayuga Medical Hospital, the urgent care section, and I had tears in my eyes when I heard that same child confiding without ambiguity, ambivalence, or hesitation to doctors and nurses who are documenting the contusions that he allegedly received at the hands of his father, according to the child's testimony. I heard the child stating that he was afraid to be with his father. I saw the bruises and I've seen the photographs of the bruises on the child's body taken by the medical professionals. I've seen the medical reports that included the word strangulation. I heard the child testify to being locked in a vehicle in the dark garage in his father's house to stop his crying, while his sister testified that she never before heard him crying like that with such terror and anguish. I will never forget listening silently when a little child asked his mother whether she did not hear him crying for her across the miles to come and rescue him. This is why I, Peyi, Soyinka-Airewele, can never exchange the call to protect children for the trappings of power. Neither can I surrender the welfare of any individual because I want proximity to the wealthy. I was witness to Ms. Brown's futile efforts to have the Child Protective Services, CPS, carry out a fair investigation, and then the subsequent misuse of school premises in order to subvert that process. I know that Ms. Coyle, the principal of Northeast Elementary School, confidentially informed Ms. Brown of the failures in CPS protocols, and that the social services worker attributed it to being because of the position of the child's father, the superintendent. I'm standing here and I am willing to stand before any courts to state categorically that I met personally one-on-one with Principal Coyle in March last year, 2020, to hand her a letter that I wrote in concert with two leading national human rights women advocates, urging for accountability and full protection of the children and for justice for Miss Brown. This was in March 2020, last year. I followed up that meeting with hand-delivered letters to the Director of Social Services in Ithaca, and I made a call on Assemblywoman Barbara Lifton, urging that they intervene to ensure fair treatment of the vulnerable. Then the pandemic struck, and the district offices were shut down the following week, as were the schools, and everything changed. Nevertheless, as you would see in Principal Coyle's text to Miss Brown, and I can share that screen with you, these texts are all on the website that was created to document some of the evidence in the case. When you go on the website, you will see a gallery, and the gallery contains evidence. I can show you some of this so that you can actually go there and look at the gallery. In this gallery, you see examples of Principal Coyle's testimonies, and you see her text messages to Miss Brown. This was when she was providing support for Miss Brown. She celebrated the resignation of Superintendent Brown. She critiqued the Board of Education. She was totally supportive of what was of Miss Brown's stance. And I think what followed that was quite shocking, as many of you have seen, because although Principal Coyle had written these texts to express how appalled she was by the superintendent's behavior, by his treatment of Miss Brown, she told me without reservation that she was willing to stand in court and testify against the superintendent, even if it cost her her job. She told me that she had a full dossier on the superintendent's misdeeds, and I thanked her lavishly and repeatedly over subsequent months for her goodwill, for her efforts and courage. I assured the principal that we would stand by her if she was threatened. Now, after celebrating the resignation of Dr. Brown, in her text messages to Anjie Brown, the principal said, "You did it. He is leaving, and he's leaving quickly." But then suddenly, the school district attorney, Kate Reed, met with Miss Coyle in the course of a secret investigation that she says is protected by attorney-client privilege. Suddenly, we were shocked to find out that the school district was able to suddenly procure an affidavit from Miss Coyle that totally denied her previous written and recorded statements in which she had acknowledged the alleged abuse. She had indicated that she knew of the instructions by the family court judge ordering the superintendent to stay out of his children's classroom. She had expressed her knowledge of the breaches in CPS procedures. This was a woman who had stood up for values. Suddenly, she writes an affidavit after a meeting with the school board attorney in which she reverses her entire position. What do you think generated such a radical change in the principle? Your guess is as good as mine, but I will say this. Any upstanding school board would have questioned the investigative ethics and strategies of their attorney, Kate Reed. They would have questioned the appearance of a possibly coercive interview. They would have been embarrassed to participate in a charade, the kind of investigation that was conducted by the same attorney who was hired to protect them. Need I say that every request that we have made to get information regarding this so-called investigation has been denied? All our FOIL requests have been denied. She says it was covered by attorney-client privilege. So Ithaca, please help me out here. Viewers at the national level, help me out here. If Kate Reed is the attorney designated, hired to defend the school board, if they are her legal clients, then why in the world was she made the judge, the jury, and the executioner in Miss Brown's petition? Does this school board seriously expect Americans to believe that this was a fair and impartial investigation? I'm sure all defense attorneys wish that they were also the judges in their own cases. This is why we teach AP US history and US government. We tell students about the system of checks and balances. We tell them about why they're opposing attorneys who present to an impartial, hopefully, judge. But here, Miss Brown is faced with local politics that is unresponsive, is arrogant, and is coercive. I was not surprised at all to hear the decision of the New York State Department of Education regarding Miss Brown's petition for justice. Let me tell you why. In January, before we submitted Miss Brown's petition to the New York State Department of Education, I spent a week of sleepless nights reading over 100 cases submitted to the Department of Education. And I found that in every single one of them, except one case about rezoning, the Department of Education decided in favor of the school, and it decided against the aggrieved parents or the students. So I knew that there would be a problem in getting judgment and fair justice for Miss Brown in the Department of Education. However, it is, I think, very good to know that the department was still compelled to resort to technicalities and legal fine prints to vindicate the Ithaca School Board and to protect the school officials. For example, there were 4 main points, legal points, that it used in order to give the judgment to Ithaca School District. First, the Department of Education said that Miss Brown may not obtain review of any underlying claims that occurred more than 30 days prior to her petition to the ICSD board. This effectively blocks parents' access to justice. It blocks a student's right to justice, because if a petition is delayed at the local level, or if it undergoes several layers of local efforts, or if it is affected by a global pandemic, as happened to Miss Brown, then the Department of Education will say it has occurred more than 30 days before the petition. Because of this time frame restriction, the Department of Education decided to limit its judgment to what it calls, I quote, the rationality of the ICSD board's response to Miss Brown's petition. It accepted the ICSD claim, that's the Ithaca City School District, claim that it conducted a fair, although absolutely secret investigation. Even though it failed and refused to speak with Miss Brown about her petition, The school board refused to accept the confidential medical statements she offered them. It failed and it refused to interview any of her witnesses, including those of us who were right there when these incidents happened. On the other hand, it was very busy procuring affidavits from school officials, even when those affidavits flatly contradicted their previously recorded and written testimonies. What kind of investigation is that? The Department of Education then also said that Ms. Brown's reply to the school board was submitted 2 business days late. You see, they had given her 5 days, extra days. The deadline was the 25th of March this year, 2021. And Ms. Brown had written to the school board's attorney to ask if they would accept service of the papers by email. They said they would accept it. Then the department gave her 5 days after that deadline to mail out the hard copies. She did both things. In spite of that, the department refused to accept her extremely detailed reply to the misrepresentations in the affidavits by the board and the superintendent. I quote, this is what they said: "Accordingly, I decline to accept the reply into the record." This decision effectively eradicated the entirety of the systematic and I think devastating challenge that was written to the things that were sent by the Ithaca School Board. The DOE refused to enter into the record, the videos, the medical documentation, and even the evidence indicating the deception in the testimonies or the misleading testimonies by district officials and school staff. In the fourth technicality, the department said that Ms. Brown's petition to remove the superintendent and other board members did not include a specific notice required by New York State CRR 277.1, and that therefore her response must be denied. This was the language that was employed by the school board and the district's lawyers. It's another reminder that the systems of injustice we have in this nation can place a mother who is working to protect her 2 children against the power of those who enjoy the privilege of having 2 expensive law firms and who do not have to spend a penny of their own money in pursuing a case against a mother who was unemployed because of COVID. It is really hard to accept that my hard-earned taxes help to pay for the ICSD attorney to wage a war against the oppressed. Now, since this was dismissed, though, Angie's reply was dismissed in its entirety for not meeting the deadline, I'm sure all her allies and supporters will be glad to know that the department was still forced to acknowledge and affirm a point that was made repeatedly in Ms. Brown's submission. And I will quote what the Department of Education said as follows. Start quote, "I acknowledge as the petitioner asserts that the respondent board, that's ICSD, characterization of her complaints as relating to an ongoing family dispute improperly minimizes the nature and the extent of her allegations." I think that was a victory. I want to remind the school board that, as many concerned members of the community have said over and over in this past year, this is a matter of public concern. It is not a domestic issue, as the school board and as Kate Reed, the lawyer, arrogantly framed it in their responses and their public statements. Vulgar shaming of female victims is not acceptable. Verbal insults and condemnation of women whose former partners are able to use their networks of power to intimidate and harass them is not a mere domestic matter. These women, like Miss Brown, are not airing private dirty linen in public. They are calling our attention to the misuse of public power and office. So, Superintendent Brown, it matters that you used public school district funds to place a girlfriend in a publicly funded position, particularly since you met her when she worked in an office that had the power to influence your child custody decisions during your divorce court proceedings. It matters a lot. The school board said they didn't have a policy on nepotism at the time that it was done. It matters. It matters that you are again using school officials to testify recently on your behalf in child support courts. Your actions blur the lines between the personal and the professional in a very dangerous way, particularly when the individuals, school officials are shown to have given misleading testimony when they are confronted with the actual recording of their statements. In political science, that's my field, corruption is not just about financial mismanagement. It is when systems are manipulated in a way that they fail to function properly and ethically. So I'm going to say to the Ithaca City School District officials and school board, the Department of Education and the Human Rights Commission decision does not spell victory or vindication of a just cause. Rather, in my opinion, it spells the triumph of deception, misdirection, of harassment, and an allegiance to power rather than to truth. It speaks of a commitment to the powerful rather than to the protection of minors in your charge. It is a reminder of the tragic lows to which we have descended, that those who are sworn to protect the children of our community are the first to assault them in a fit of irate vindictiveness, such as when the deputy superintendent of the district, aided by their attorney, funded by taxpayers, chose to release the intimate emails, photographs, and information concerning Miss Brown's minor children to any member of the public in defiance of their privacy rights. Such unprofessional and unethical behavior is ugly and it is appalling. The district was even willing to damage other innocent, uninvolved minors whose images were released in photographs in situations where Miss Brown's kids were participating. Ithaca educational leaders were willing to violate the FERPA rights of children who became mere collateral damage in the headlong drive to silence Miss Brown and quash her cry for justice. Is this the level of ethics we expect from our school officials? Can we drop any lower? This is the same district in which the president of the school board, Mr. Ainsley, flung served papers into the snow, denied knowing me, though he knew me very well, refused to answer and ordered me off the porch, his porch, when we tried to serve him with Miss Brown's papers. Watch out for the video capturing that terrible, nerve-wracking experience when Miss S and I had to help Miss Brown serve papers on these school board members. Let me be clear about it. It is bad enough that these acts of injustice are happening with impunity in this district, but do not wrap it in the distraction of a struggle, of a larger struggle. Racism is real, and it has robbed too many millions of our lives, rights, and well-being. There is a genuine struggle against racism that is happening across this nation. But the rhetoric that the ICSD leadership is using, claiming that all its actions are part of a war against racism, this is a weapon of war to silence meaningful criticism of its oppressive actions. Anti-racism is not a place, a space in which oppressors can take refuge from actions that victimize and oppress the poor, the vulnerable, the young, women, and the powerless. If I were on the school board, I would pin the Department of Education decision on my computer to remind myself that never again will I be party to such an abuse of power, to such a subversion of justice. I would share it with my children to remind them that they should never fail to support other vulnerable children. To the Ithaca community, it must stand as a reminder that we have systems here that function to subvert the rights of our children. It should remind us of the dangers of being silent and the power of speaking up. Hold up. I want to give a shout out to the hundreds of individuals in this city who signed petitions calling for accountability. They turned up at school board meetings. They questioned their school officials. I am personally applauding with gratitude the students of the Ithaca High School, their school newspaper, the IHS Tatler, and the student representatives to the school board who challenged, critiqued, and spoke truth to power, even when the local media seemed cowed. Am I discouraged by the decision of the Department of Education or the Human Rights Commission? Oh, no way. A luta continue. Victory is assured if a community is willing to stand strong against repression and oppression of any kind. So onwards then, in solidarity and best wishes to all of us. Take care and God bless.